All right, welcome to another episode of Medicine Mondays. I am yours truly, Dr. Pierre, your favorite board-certified internist, host of Medicine Mondays, the Empower Yourself for Better Health series. Of course, our other YouTube channel, Real Physician Reacts. Make sure you check that out on Thursdays. And guys, I have an amazing discussion for you lined up today. I've been following Dr. Jack for a while, and we're gonna get all into her business in a minute. But what she focuses on. First of all, she's a licensed clinical psychologist. She's an intimacy and relationship coach. And if you've been with the Lunch and Learn community, you know we've kind of dabbled, but we really haven't gotten to the nitty gritty. So when I saw her, I was like, I do this a lot on social media. I ghost follow a lot of my creators. Right. I'm like, ooh, like I think she would be an amazing guest. Right. So first of all, again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, because I already know how it is, right? Thank you for taking the time out to really bless your wisdom and impart some knowledge here on the Lunch and Learn community. Thank you, Dr. Jack.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm excited.
So because we'll have your bio and everything in our description, but for someone, if this is the first time they're watching me or you, like, who is Dr. Jack, right? Like, so just so we can get in the right mindset, so they understand why, like, I'm so giddy on making sure like she got on the show.
Yes, that's a good question. So I am a psychologist and intimacy coach, but I did a lot of couples therapy in the past. I work with a lot of couples, and one of the things that I found out is that a lot of people struggle with self-confidence, sexual confidence within their relationships, and it impacts their intimacy. So I became particularly interested in trying to figure out how to help couples to have better intimacy within their relationships. And that's the thing that I'm most passionate about. So I work mostly with women who are in relationships or want to be in relationships, or women who are married, and help them to have better sex in their lives, help them to find their voice, to navigate for what they want, to explore things differently, and to really show up more confidently in their relationships and in their overall life.
You know, like I said, I got so many questions, and I can't wait for the discussion today. But when I just, like, as you were speaking, I was thinking about when you're working with your different subgroups, as far as especially women are concerned. Was there anything that surprised you, especially when you kind of went down this route of intimacy relationship? Was there something that kind of surprised you along your journey?
The lack of education surprised me. Yes, I think that was the thing that surprised me most. But I think because I'm a part of the population who has been self-taught regarding sexual education, I feel like my knowledge is so much more different than I think what we get, which is very limited information. A lot of times women aren't even necessarily familiar with their parts and what they're properly called. A lot of times I'll be surprised by some people not knowing that there's 3 holes down there, not 2. So a lot of information.
We're talking like adults, right? We're
talking about adults with
okay.
kids, multiple children, very well educated. I've had clients who have thought that the G-spot was in areas that it's not. Like, I think the educational piece regarding female anatomy is just lacking. And I think that in and of itself, like when you know your body, when you understand where your body feels more pleasurable, where there's more nerve endings, etc., like you can just really maximize your pleasure. And I think that women just have been limited to information and have not necessarily been encouraged to explore and get more additional knowledge.
You know, essentially now, I'll tell you, Lunch and Learn community, I'm an internist, right? And I've said this before. One of the reasons why I went to internal medicine is to kind of get away from women's health and kids, right? Like, I'll be honest, again, I have no secrets here.
Yes.
But one of the reasons why is I remember even as a medical student, pre-med student, that I used to always get kicked out of the rooms. Anytime it was, OB rotation, everything, it was like, hey, can he like stuff? So for like, I just had like this mental block that like, all right, yeah, women's health just not gonna be for me. So that's why I love when I'm able to get experts on here who really, because again, I'm Lunch and Learn community, I am listening and learning, just like you with Dr. Jack is kind of dropping the knowledge bombs on here. Now, Dr. Jack, first of all, I love elevator pitches, right? Or, just kind of slogans, right? So yours is, I help modern, ambitious, high achieving women have better sex and intimacy in their relationships. First of all, that knocks it right out the park, right? Because automatically I already know, okay, this is the avatar for this person here. Mm-hmm. Now, was it just kind of I know you talked about kind of in your training, you kind of leaning, was it just something where you found that there was just a void in this certain, population group that needed really your expertise?
Absolutely. I felt that there was a void, and that woman is the younger version of myself. Right. And so it really became clear to me that there were so many women that are really, really high achievers. They're ambitious. They have career goals. They knock those out of the park. They have family goals. They get it done. Right. They're good parents. They're good wives, etc. They're great friends. But really, when it comes to their overall sex life, things are lacking, and there's shame behind being able to actually even speak to that in a very authentic way. And so a lot of times women suffer in silence. And that is the place that I was in before I went through my healing journey, to come to the other side, to be able to speak to this topic in ways where I'm able to help other women.
So who is the prototypical person that's knocking on your door, right? When they're coming to see you, is it a person who's gone through a level of frustration? Is it a person who's kind of in the grays, they know something's wrong, something needs help? Who typically comes to see you, and how, I guess more importantly, how do they come? Is it more of no, you got to go see Dr. Jack? How does a person end up finding you?
Yeah, so oftentimes they're finding me through social media. That's where I'm most active. And they really are engaging with my content and starting to feel seen and heard in regards to some of the struggles that they're experiencing. Oftentimes, by the time someone comes to me, a lot of times they've been in their relationship, they've tried a couple of things regarding sex, they know that things are not necessarily working and going well because they're getting that feedback from their partner, and they don't know what to do next in terms of support, resources, etc. So they're typically coming to me, say, hey, Dr. Jack, for example, my partner says I never want to have sex. And when we do have sex, they feel like I'm just kind of checking a box. I don't know how to show up because I'm tired, I'm frustrated, and I'm not necessarily getting the sex that I need and want. And I don't know how to communicate that in a way that makes me feel comfortable. And so that is typically what is happening. There's a part of the equation where women are feeling unsatisfied and not necessarily knowing why or how to communicate that. And then there's the other piece of, again, ambitious, overachieving women who, are really, bosses in their life and in terms of, being able to complete their goals. And so they're really tired and haven't necessarily prioritized self-care in a way, or prioritize their pleasure and their passion as something that's really important to them. So really helping them to get those two areas in line is typically when they're coming knocking at my door and connecting with me through social media.
But what I love, especially because we're big here in the luxury community as far as self-care, but I don't think I've ever heard people reference when discussing self-care in the sexual aspect, right? And
yes,
obtaining that sexual need. It's usually more of getting away from, the rat race, working and family, getting kind of away from that. But I've never actually seen it referenced to making sure your sexual desires are also taken care of.
Yes. And, I think the fact that we don't talk about it in that way, I'm so passionate about tying the two together because it is a part of self-care. Sexual self-care is self-care, right? Just like we are entire human beings and we have a sexual part of ourselves. Right? Just like we have a spiritual aspect, we have a physical aspect, we have an emotional, a social. Why is sexual left out of the equation, right? We are mammals. And so I think it's so important to highlight, are we attending to our sexual needs in a way where we are experiencing pleasure? When we think about how health and sexual health are connected, there's so many benefits that help our immune system, our blood pressure, our stress level, level, et cetera, that are directly related to sex. And so I think that when we have the conversation around self-care and sex is not a part of the problem, we're continuing to perpetuate that this is an area of ourselves that is separate and not as important. And really it's the opposite.
Dropping bombs today. Ooh. Now, all right. So question. Now, is this something that, especially in your training with your level of expertise, is this something that kind of happens like from adulthood on? Is there an origin even when we're young? Like, why are we at this point when we're adults and still having the issue of, like, first of all, like, let's give me, definitely follow her on social media platforms. Like, just some of the titles on some of her lives, I'll be like, oh, okay, all right, it's going down over there. But like it shouldn't, right? Like, just her title shouldn't like get a response mentally from me. But like, we're still in that state where just being sexually free and talking about it gets people in a different place. So like,
Yes.
do you think is that like an adulthood? Again, especially because I only talk to adults, I only deal with adults as an internist. Mm-hmm. Like, is this something like the young girls are facing? I'm assuming boys too, but definitely we're talking about the women. Like, are young girls kind of facing some of this, the lack of knowledge or confidence in that standpoint too?
Absolutely. So I feel like this topic right here, I mean, this is a whole different separate podcast that is also so important, but really, I oftentimes ask people, what is and my dissertation was actually about this. It was talking about risky sexual behaviors and linking it to peer influences, parental influences, and social media influences. And what I found in my dissertation research was that parents who are having conversations with their children around sex, around protecting themselves from sex, around like what sex is actually helpful to them in terms of decreasing their risky sexual behavior as a young adult, as an emerging adult, right? And so what happens, and I think that what the biggest problem is a lot of times most people didn't necessarily have healthy conversations with their caregivers that were created under the umbrella of really helpful information regarding sexual health. A lot of times those conversations, especially for women, are like, listen, don't get pregnant, don't have sex until you're married. That's the end of the conversation. Right. Ooh. And so the ability to ask questions, the ability to learn more about one's body, a lot of times those conversations were shut down. And a lot of women experience shame around just wanting to know and learn more. And so I think there's really a generational issue regarding the comfortability of parents talking to their kids about sex, providing them with helpful information. Listen, kids gonna find out anyway. They're gonna learn from the friends. First of all, the friend got wrong information anyway. Yes. They're gonna learn from their friends. They're gonna learn from TV, which TV, porn, all of those tools, they have a place. I'm for all of those tools, but they're entertainment. They are not educational tools. And so when we're looking at TV and porn and trying to figure out and navigate sex, no wonder why we don't necessarily know our bodies well or how to ask for what we want, because what we have available is not helping us to have those conversations or to understand ourselves better. So there's a big problem.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Interesting. And what's sad is that even like I mess with my kids all the time because they got like iPads now, right? Like the access to get information is as open as it's probably ever been. Like I remember when I was in, we didn't have a computer in my house till I was like 17 years old. So for me to go online, because at the time it was Nextel, Chirps, so our phones weren't going online, right? So for me to go online, I had to walk to the library to go online. Whereas like now it's so handheld, but even despite our ease of it, like you're saying it's still secluded in that like box that for some reason we're not even, allowing especially young girls to even tap into.
We're not. I had a friend of mine who called me. She's like, this is an emergency. Like, I need to talk to you ASAP. I'm like, what's going on? I'm thinking like something really bad happened. She's like, my daughter asked me, what is the G-spot? And she was like mortified. And I'm like, this is this is a very valid question, right? This is an opportunity, in like the way that parents respond to those type of questions sends a message about what is okay and not okay to know regarding your anatomy, right? She didn't say, listen, I want such and such to touch my G-spot. And even if she did, I mean, that's a different conversation. But in the way in which you respond as a parent, it's really, really important to be curious and compassionate, right? And a lot of times young women are not receiving those type of responses or the ability to ask questions to learn. And so they're trying to figure it out on their own. And then by the time they come to me when they're in their mid 30s and they've been married and they haven't been able to ask questions or learn or feel like they have the voice to advocate for themselves, they feel really stuck and they feel really alone in those experiences.
Dr. Jack, let's talk about, and you've, because that was heavy. Because you talk a lot about the aspect of sexual perfectionism.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like explain that in a manner in one, like, is it the fact that we don't know what it is, or we're trying to attain it and it's not attainable? Like that's like, so I wouldn't like kind of like on both of those the ends right there.
Yeah. So one, I would say individuals who struggle with perfectionism in general are likely going to be, they're going to be more likely to struggle from sexual perfectionism. So if you're someone who in your job, you want things to be perfect, in your relationship, you want things to be perfect, you want to be the perfect parent, you want to be the perfect friend, the likelihood that you probably want your sex to be perfect is probably on board with kind of how you show up in the world, right? And when we think about perfectionism in general, really what it is at the root anxiety. So an anxiety is bred in, instead of being in the moment, you're worried about the future and you're projecting the future in a negative way, right? Mm-hmm. So let's think about, you're in the bedroom, you're being intimate with your partner, and you start to ruminate and think about all of the things that may not be going right in the moment, right? Thinking about all of the musts. I must have an orgasm, it must be perfect timing. It must be super romantic. Like my partner must approve of my body. Like all of those things are rooted in sexual perfectionism. And what they do is they take you out of the moment, take you out of the experience. They take you out of your body and being present and really being able to experience pleasure. And what they do instead is make you really, really anxious and kind of pull you out of the particular moment. And this is just not for women. This is also for men. A lot of like the performance anxiety aspect of, I must maintain an erection. My erection must be super hard. Like that is a part of sexual perfectionism as well. So definitely not gender specific in any right, but it can definitely show up. And it takes us away from the experience when we create all of these expectations about what sex needs to be like, right? And the real truth is sex doesn't have to be perfect to be amazing. It doesn't have to be perfect to be good. And sometimes when we have that sexual perfectionistic tendencies, we miss that. And we're focused on all of the wrong things instead of really being inside of our body and being present.
Now, that's just me being the conspiracy theorist that I am.
Mm-hmm.
I blame a lot of stuff on us. By us, I mean men. Do you feel, especially with the clients you're working with, do you feel like a lot of the blame gets put on women from the direction of us? Like we're blaming like our partner for whatever that reason, like, no, you're not doing this well, you're not doing that well, and maybe not necessarily internalizing what we also may do well. And then in that same cycle now, like women kind of internalize it and say like, yeah, he's right or she's right. Like I should be doing like, where do you feel like most of the blame on that lack of good sex comes from?
This is such a good question. I feel like you're trying to get me in trouble. The fellas will be like,
no, again, that's why I preface it, because like I feel like a lot of us, I feel like men, we blame others for a lot of our problems. Mm-hmm. Without internalizing like, all right, what am I like not doing right, not doing correct? Like, but like I just feel like we're more comic, like especially when you mention like the ejection, erection and everything else. I'm like, oh, I could definitely see a man blaming the woman on why he can't keep it hard for long, 10 minutes or something like that.
Absolutely. So to answer your question, from what I've seen, and this is just anecdotal, oftentimes what's happening is women are blaming themselves and men are blaming their partners for why the sex is not going well. And the reality is that both people are involved in the sexual experience and making it the most intimate experience that they can. And so I think that what then kind of needs to be rewritten and reframed is how can we both show up fully for this experience to be able to please one another?
How can we? I
Yes,
love it.
yes. For an example, I'm thinking about a question that was actually asked to me recently where someone reached out to me and they were sharing that they were engaging in sex with their partner lost the erection. They're trying to like figure out what's going on, and the partner says, well, you weren't that lubricated, so that's why, my erection went down, right?
That is
Which
what
again,
we would do.
that's an example of what you said, right? You're not lubricated, so that's why my erection, right? But if we kind of look at the root, and again, this is the educational piece, we haven't been given the tools and the knowledge. Women often take an average of 18 minutes to get fully aroused, right? So when we think about sex, which the average amount of sex is from 3 to 7 minutes, talking about penetrative sex, right? If you think about that average, if you think about that arousal time, right? The math ain't mathing, which means that a lot of times,
that is hilarious.
no
Okay.
foreplay, there's no buildup, there's no warming up the car. The expectation that someone is just going to be fully lubricated is unrealistic. And it's unfair because men and women's bodies are built differently. And what we have been taught about sex has really prioritized male pleasure. And so I think that learning.
That's a bar. That's a heavy one. That's a heavy one.
It's true. It is true. It is so true. It really, it has been framed that sex starts with a hard erection and it ends when the erection is soft. And prescribing to that as what sex is really a prescription for males. And so I think expanding that, learning, being open, it can definitely help build intimacy, connection, and novelty within the sexual relationship.
Ooh, a lot of bars drop. A lot of bars drop there. Now, I guess obviously, we won't blame men for a second. Do you work with same-sex partners, and do you find some of the same kind of foundations as far as the anxiety and not performing as well, or not just internalizing? Does that happen at that extent as well, or like as far as the same-sex partners?
That's a really good question. So for me, a lot of what I've been talking about in terms of like the discrepancies that happen are for heterosexual partners. What the research actually suggests is that for same-sex partners, they're having a whole lot better sex. And the reason why, and this is
again, I'm smiling because like
they are having, the orgasm gap that exists, it's not as large as it is when it comes to male and female sexual relationships. And it is because there's more of an understanding in terms of what individuals need. And again, when we're prescriptive to the sexual scripts that we've been given by society, they're really, really inaccurate. And so I think that same-sex couples have the advantage of being able to have conversations in a very different way that then lead to more understanding of one's body in comparison to heterosexual couples. So when same-sex couples come to me, it's usually about things such as communication difficulties, challenges with listening, understanding, just wanting to build more novelty in the relationship. But it's less about understanding what they want and need sexually.
I knew it. I figured that was the case, but I was like, let me ask him.
It's definitely the case. It's definitely the case.
So how has self-love, shame, and miscarriage really affected like the career path that you've been on thus far? Like how have you been able to kind of like wrap all three into this beautiful product that we see these days?
Yeah, so I spoke to it a little bit earlier. I definitely went through my own journey of trying to figure out a lot of this on my own. So I kind of mentioned that my elevator pitch is the younger version of myself. About 2 years ago, I experienced a miscarriage, and I was looking forward to getting pregnant. It was very, very much planned. Again, I'm very goal oriented and task oriented. So I'm like, if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. And unfortunately, we had pregnancy loss. We experienced it, my husband and myself. And what happened thereafter was I started to experience some symptoms of depression. I became very disconnected with my body. I stopped trusting my body, because I had to really think about the thoughts that were coming up for me regarding, like, this, my body was designed to carry a baby and I can't do that. What does that mean about my worth? Right. So that's where the shame piece comes in. And all of this is very, very common for women who experience pregnancy loss and miscarriage. I felt very alone in that experience. Not a lot of people talk about their experiences with miscarriage. And so for me, it was navigating and trying to figure all of this out on my own. At the same time, I also, have a husband, have a partner who has needs. And of course, after miscarriage, and we don't talk about this as much, but there's a time period where they actually tell you do not get pregnant, right? So you first have to restrict yourself from having sex because your body needs to heal. And then thereafter, it's like, all right, you got the thumbs up, let's go again. And there can be a disconnection. There can be a fear. What if I do get pregnant and this happens again? For me, I experienced a lot of weight gain, which then, impacted my self-esteem, because it was really difficult at that particular time, because I was feeling depressed, to take care of my body in a healthy way. And so all of those things compiled together really created challenges in my marriage. And we had talked about sex before in a very candid way, but it was more so about how we can improve things regarding sex. Wasn't necessarily focused on areas of concern. And so we had some of the most challenging conversations we've ever had. Conversations that started to make me question, like, is this relationship for us? And it was a really scary and lonely place to be in. And when I looked for resources, what I found is that there were so many things that were suggesting things that were external. So for example, you need to get this lingerie, or you need to take this de-writing course, or you need to learn how to give oral sex better. And I'm like, I got all of these things. I can check these boxes.
Right.
But I feel like I needed to heal from the inside out. And that is what I wanted to create for other women, because when I came out of the other side of that, I felt a whole lot more whole, a whole lot more connected to my body, able to talk to my partner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was an amazing experience. And I felt like there was a void regarding services being available for women who are struggling with fertility, who are struggling with pregnancy loss, and want to start to find passion and pleasure in their intimate experiences again.
And what I love about your story, because a lot of times, especially when you're on the outside, right, and you're going through the experience, you tend to personalize it and show yourself away from the world and think you're the only person who's experiencing this.
Yes.
And what I love about you is because you're so open. Like I said, ladies and lunch learning community, please follow her. Like you definitely need to follow her. What I love is that because you're so open, now I know that there's people who are watching you like, oh my God, I'm not the only one.
Yes.
And once they're able to, once that blinder is able to come off, that I'm not the only one suffering this, then that's when movement occurs. So that's why I just love everything that you're doing, because you don't find people as open as you are about the trials and tribulations, especially in kind of the world that we live in, where everything is kind of the end product, right? They see the end product of success, but they don't see the steps and hurdles, the bumps, the backslides.
Yes.
That force you to kind of keep moving on. So that's, I loved everything about that. And that's why I wanted to touch on it, because like, I know that continues to be ingrained in how you teach, when you teach, and how passionate you are, serving the community that you are. Because again, maybe because I'm older, maybe because I recognize it now, but like the amount of my female colleagues who I see, are having infertility issues, having sexual related issues, and, like all these issues here that like I might have been blinded to the world until like I kind of opened up and I recognized like, oh, you too, you too, you like, and then all of a sudden you can just see like how apparent it is.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for asking that question and for speaking to it. And it is common. It's common, but you wouldn't necessarily know because it's not discussed. Like 1 in 4 is a current statistic of how many women experience miscarriage. That's 25%
Wow.
of the world.
Wow. I didn't
Right.
even realize it was that high. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it's something that and I mean this is right in time for it's pregnancy loss and awareness month. So it's perfect timing to have these type of conversations. So thank you for opening up your platform to be able to speak to the importance of gaining support and not feeling alone in that experience.
So how do we get to the point where we're sexually free and sexually confident in what we're doing? Like, how do we like get to that point? You don't have to drop all your gems because I need people to be able to follow you, work with you, and all that. But like how do we like what type of nibblers do we have to help us kind of get in that direction?
Yeah, so I'm going to give 3 niblets, right? The first, and I borrowed this from Dr. Emily, who's a very seasoned sex expert, but I just love this quote so much. Conversation is lubrication, right? So what I mean by that is oftentimes, and it's not uncommon for someone to reach out to me and say, hey, my partner and I never talk about sex. We never talk about what we want, what we need, if things are going well or if things are not going well. And so I think that the first step is starting to have conversations with your partner around sex, right? Starting to even ask yourself, right? Having that self dialogue. Am I having the sex that I want? A lot of times we don't even really ask ourselves that question. Am I sexually satisfied in having the sex that I want? Start with asking yourself that. Then again, being able to kind of build from there.
It's right? Funny, but like it's crazy that we really aren't.
We really don't. We really don't ask these questions. Again, how are we prioritizing our sexual self-care? So starting with conversations. A lot of times, even with conversations, if you're introducing it to your partner, and this is something that you guys haven't talked about, you want to think about timing, you want to think about your tone, and you also don't necessarily want to have these conversations in the bedroom. You want the bedroom to be for sex and sleep, right? So having these conversations outside the bedroom, when you're walking the dog.
Another bar. I like it.
Yeah. So that's really important. So how you have the conversation is important. Secondly, vulnerability. Right? Vulnerability is so important to overall intimacy. And so, again, just like you kind of mentioned, like we don't necessarily have these conversations. We keep a lot of information inside. When we start sharing with our partners some of our wants, our needs, our fantasies regarding sex, it builds intimacy. And again, the more that we talk about sex, the more that we want it. Right. And so, for example, if I'm talking about Red Lobster all day, guess what I'm going to want at the end of the day? Yep. I'm going to want some Red Lobster. I'm going to want some Cheddar Bay biscuits. I'm just saying. And so sex is very similarly. So when we can carve out time to kind of just talk, be vulnerable with our partner, that increases our sexual freedom as well. And then thirdly, being able to surrender during sex, right? So kind of tying it back to the perfectionism piece. When we're being perfectionistic, we're being in our mind and not in our body. I tell my clients, you're being in your mind and not in your vagina, right? And so how can we then try to clear out the thought, clear out the to-do list of all the things that you have to do, and really prioritize your pleasure in this moment? This is what self-care is about, enjoying the moment. We sometimes go through life on autopilot. I know many people, like, especially if they're driving to work, they can just get there and not even necessarily enjoy the ride because they're in their head, right? They're not paying attention to what's going on around. You're just like, oh, I'm here already.
You just right? On like autopilot. You just, and you know you're pulling up to the job.
Yes. And that is what we want to avoid during sex. We don't want to be in autopilot. We don't want you to be in your head thinking about what you're going to make for dinner tomorrow, or if your partner is noticing, a roll on your back. They don't care, right? And so a lot of times what the focus then becomes is focusing on your body, slowing down, taking deep breaths, using your senses, focusing on what am I hearing right now that I like? What am I seeing that I like? Is there anything that I smell that is providing joyful, pleasant experience for me, right? So there's so many facets of sex that we miss because again, we're thinking about some type of goal. And so I think that surrendering to our body, surrendering to our experience is definitely important foundational component of building that sexual freedom and confidence.
So much gems today. Again, I stress all the time, right? I like the guests who I have on here are absolutely just amazing people in general, but like phenomenal really in what they do in lunch learning community. If you did not get that like from this discussion today, I don't know what to tell you. Dr. Jack, what are we working on anything? Where can people follow you? Where can people find you? Let's kind of, I want to give this time so that people can either write down, know what social media outlets they need to follow, know where they need to book consultations, like where give them all details of what's going on with Dr. Jack right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I recently launched my website and my one-on-one coaching services. So I'm really excited about that. Been doing things kind of behind the scenes for a while, but now I'm out there. So you can contact me on my website, which is drjac, drjac.co. So on there, you can read all about my one-on-one coaching services. If you are interested in coaching, I can definitely get you connected with those services. Additionally, I have on my website currently a free guide. It's 5 ways to have better sex now. And so some of the things that we talked about, I talk in more detail with that guide. So that is a great gem that I would definitely suggest you download, and you can start using some of those tips tonight. So that's an amazing place to start. I also do 2 other things. So I do my one-on-one coaching, but I also do couples retreats as well as speaking engagements. So if you and 6 other couples are going on a retreat next year and you want to like book a day that's focused on intimacy, you can hit me up and we can talk about how to create that experience for you so the couples are leaving with more tools and tips regarding pleasure and intimacy that they can use for the remainder of the relationship, right? We want to keep things spicy. Novelty is the key to having a healthy, sexy sex life. So that's another service. And then if you're interested in having me as a speaker for an event, a podcast, or interested to talk about sexual perfectionism, sexual confidence, shame and miscarriage, those are the things that I'm really passionate about speaking to. You can definitely reach out on my contact page on my website and I will get back with you. And we can chat about what you'd like to talk about and how I can serve your audience.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And again, guys, I'm not joking, especially if you're on Instagram, like definitely follow her. Like
Yes.
just the lives alone will get you mentally right. So definitely need to follow. Again, Dr. Jack, thank you for everything that you've done today. And more importantly, thank you for what you continue to do. Like you're touching so many people in a community who I'm almost sure have felt alone, have felt not listened to for a long time. So yeah. I'm glad that like you're coming out of the shop. I'm not sure if there was a reason why like you were kind of low key before and now you're coming out, but like thank you for like saying like, no, I'm gonna put myself out there and like really like go to bat for the community who I know, because I'm pretty sure like that population, we don't even know the amount of women who probably suffer from the issues that you take care of because they're still silent to this day, unfortunately.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for just being so kind and all the great, wonderful things that you just said. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm glad to be out there. The reception has been amazing. And yeah, I'm just really here to serve. And so I really had to, in terms of that push, make it not about me and about the people that needed me. And so I'm here.
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you guys next week.
All right. Thank you.